This is the multiple award-winning GardenDC podcast, the podcast about everything gardening in the Washington, D.C. and Mid-Atlantic region. I'm your host, Kathy Jentz. I'm the editor of Washington Gardener magazine. Our content is aimed at gardening enthusiasts, people who grow everything, from edibles to ornamentals, natives to exotics. If it grows in our area, that's what we talk about. Welcome to episode 238 of the GardenDC podcast. In this episode, we talk with Nak Min Go, celebrated photographer and author of Roses in the Garden, all about photographing flowers. The plant profile is on kangaroo paws, and we share what's going on in the garden, as well as some upcoming local gardening events in the What's New segment. We close out with the last word on transforming urban spaces by Christy Page of Green Prints. This episode, we're joined by Nak Min Go. And Nak, you are our first-time guest on the GardenDC podcast. Welcome.
Thank you.
So we're going to talk all about your new book and the wonderful world of roses and floral photography. But before that, we like to ask our guests on the GardenDC podcast, were they born with chlorophyll in their veins and a green thumb?
I was born in Vietnam.
Mm-hmm.
And so I guess I was born in a small town, so nature was sort of all around me. It was by the seaside. So yeah, I grew up in a kind of idyllic, beautiful place.
And do you have any early childhood memories of picking flowers or fruits or vegetables with your family?
Yeah, I mean, we had a small garden in our house, and flowers are always in the background. You know, it's a tropical place, so bougainvilleas are always very bright. We have what's called a flame tree, which are very flamboyant. That's another name of the tree. They burst into bloom just before the end of the school year, so it's always an occasion. It's just always something I look forward to. And the flowers are deep red, and the whole entire tree turns red, and it's just spectacular. And also the association with the time of year is just a very joyful memory of that particular tree. And
I can imagine. I mean, end of school year, you are ready.
Yeah.
And that's a great little marker of celebration, a kind of, we call it phenology in nature, when things converge.
Yeah. Yeah, just, the announcement of time in the landscape.
Mm-hmm.
That, for me, is the association that I have with plants and flowers.
And any childhood memories that you cherish, maybe of things that you either had in your meals there, or a special spice or food that you remember?
All the food that we had, was beautiful and fresh. Everything was prepared that day for that meal. Nothing was processed. So it's all fresh herbs, fresh ingredients, and it was always things that we either can grow, like fruit in trees, or things fresh from the market, nothing out of a can. So it's all of that. And in fact, the first couple of years when we moved to the United States, that was the thing that I missed the most, because of course we didn't have those ingredients, those herbs, those fruits, all of those things to cook with.
And now you're in New York City?
Mm-hmm.
And so I'm imagining you don't have much gardening space or access to just going outside and picking some fresh fruit off a tree.
Oh, picking fresh fruit off the tree is not an option. I mean, that to me is miraculous. I love fruit trees for that. Just the idea that you can just pick a fruit fresh off the tree and eat it and have sustenance and nutrition and beautiful taste.
Mm-hmm.
The joy of that. No, but when I first moved to New York, I lived on 10th Street, and at the time there was a building on the corner of 5th Avenue and 10th Street where there was an apple tree. And I remember I would just go and stand at that corner and look at that tree when it was in bloom and when it was in fruit. And it was like a miracle to me to witness this tree over the life cycle of a year. Yeah,
Amazing. Well, apples are special.
they are.
And so do you grow anything on a windowsill or indoor gardening?
I do have houseplants, and I do actually do take care of my building's garden, which is a tiny little plot in front of our building. And I do plant things there and take care of it. And it is a joy because my building is on a corner, so we get a lot of people walking by. It's a kind of lively neighborhood. And people always stop by and look at the garden and talk to me. Sometimes they ask me questions. Sometimes they tell me how much they enjoy the garden. So yeah, it's nice. It's small, but it's a nice experience to have.
And what are you growing in this garden?
So I grow a few roses. I have a big camellia that people often think is a rose, but it blooms in April, and people come by and the tree. I mean, it's a big shrub, almost tree size, and it's covered in um, pink flowers. And people say, "Is this a rose?" I say, "No, it's a camellia." And it's interesting because I think that most people who don't know anything about flowers will know rose as a name of a flower. So that's the first rose. It's the first flower name that they reach for, right? And so I love fragrant flowers. So I grow mock orange. I have three different varieties of mock orange and irises and calicanthus, hydrangea, and geraniums, or anything I can possibly put in this tiny plot. I will try.
That sounds like an amazing corner urban garden, especially 3 different types of mock orange. That's one of my personal favorites, is that wonderful scent you get off their flowers.
Yes. When it's in flower, it's just magnificent. The flowers are beautiful and they're white. So at night, they pop in the dark and they just smell amazing.
Especially, I think in the early evening, you kind of get that fragrance floating towards you, and you're like, what is that scent? And
Yeah.
I imagine all those passerbys are like,
Yeah.
wow. So you are a professional photographer and you have several books under your name. So let's talk about them for a little bit and how you got into photography.
So how I got into photography was kind of a roundabout way. I actually was working with someone on a film and we looked at a lot of photography books and I thought, oh, I really like this. And a friend on the film, she was the photographer, the still photographer, gave me a lesson on how to print black and white. So that's how I started. I just started setting up a little dark room in my apartment and I started taking pictures, mostly black and white. And then eventually I learned how to print color and it just went from there. And I did my first book on flower arrangements because I love flowers and just wanted to spend more time with them. When I shoot a lot of magazines. I shoot for a lot of magazines, interior magazines. And we would go in and photograph a house or an apartment, whatever the case might be, but there would always be flowers. But often people didn't know what the flowers were. And that sort of gave me the desire to do a book where I would photograph the flowers inside a home, but the focus would be on the flowers and not so much on the home. And then just to talk about the flowers and how they are associated with the season and what they mean culturally and all of that. So that's always been my interest, all the history and the culture behind plants and flowers. So bringing nature home, flower arrangements through the seasons was my first book. And then to explore that flower and human connection again, I did my second book, which was In Bloom, where I just focused on people who have a passion for flowers and make it their work. So there was a painter, there was a woman who makes beautiful paper flowers, there was a florist, there was a landscape designer. So that's just sort of my interest in not just flowers, but the way that flowers connect with people and vice versa. And then my next book was about a garden in Morocco. And it's a beautiful garden that an Italian writer had created in order to save these native indigenous wildflowers in northern Morocco from extinction. These beautiful wildflowers were basically under threat from overdevelopment.
And that was Eden Revisited? Wow, that's a beautiful book.
Yeah, it was a joy to make that book. It took several years, and I spent a lot of time there.
And you have a book, New York Green, Discovering the City's Most Treasured Parks and Gardens. And I'm going to be visiting and touring New York's gardens this summer with the Water Garden Society. So this is definitely one I'm going to be studying.
Yes. So yeah, that was a book that I did sort of during the pandemic, and it just gave me a chance to explore my home turf, really, because as a garden photographer, I actually travel to lots of different places to photograph gardens, but not really spending any time in New York itself. So that was a beautiful experience for me, and discovering all these places. Some of the places were my favorites that I spent a lot of time in all the years that I've been here, but others were new to me. And actually, since then, there have been new parks in the city. So it's a lot of people are surprised at how green New York can be, and I'm really proud of that, actually.
Yeah, and a lot of people don't know a lot of the history of the city, that there was an arboretum where Rockefeller Center is sitting right now. And that's not very green right now, but it was. And what are some of your favorite New York gardens and spaces?
Well, I live near the Brooklyn Bridge Park, so that is definitely a favorite. I spent a lot of time there. I did some volunteer work there as well. And Rebecca McMacken was the director of horticulture there, and I got to know her. And I just love what she does. And I think she's a fascinating and wonderful person in the horticultural world, and we're very lucky to have her.
Yeah, I've seen her speak a few times about that park and some of the restoration work they're doing there. It's incredible. So your new book, Roses in the Garden.
So Roses in the Garden began, I would say, when my dad died. He had a small garden, and he had some roses. I remember thinking during the last week of his life that I wanted the roses to bloom for him one last time, which they didn't. So that thought stayed with me, and it was both the desire to keep him with me longer and this sort of wishful thinking that I'm going to show him all the roses that he missed. So I just started, I was doing volunteer work at the Brooklyn Botanic Garden, and I got to know the rosarian, and we became friends, and she allowed me to bring home roses to photograph at home. And so I had this wonderful time where I could photograph these roses in the solitude and peace of my own home, and sort of have a mental conversation with my dad, and just saying all these beautiful roses, but also learning about their history. And just from there, I just learned and got deeper and deeper into the history of roses. And, you know, it has such an incredibly rich history culturally across time and places in the Middle East, in Persia, in India, in China, and in the West. So it just, from there, it was just endless. And then at some point, my publisher asked what I would want to do next, and I just thought maybe it's time for me to do a book on roses. And so that was it. I went and photographed 11 gardens in different places that represented different aspects of the rose that I wanted to explore. And that's the book.
And it's incredibly beautiful. Of course, we're working in audio format, so I'm going to recommend that our listeners grab a copy of the book at their local independent bookstore or from bookshop.org or wherever they buy their books, and just sit with a cup of coffee or tea, and I think they're going to be amazed by some of that photography that you've captured.
Thank you. It was, I would say it was easy because these places were so beautiful. You know, I felt like all I had to do was just put the camera up and, you know, got the picture.
It helps when your subject is very photogenic.
Yes.
and naturally.
Gardens are always photogenic.
And so that brings us to floral photography, and especially photographing just flowers, because there's a whole different science, I think, to garden photography, of the overall garden, but maybe we'll just focus on the flower part. So I would say people's iPhones, are filled with pictures of flowers, but they're not the best pictures. So maybe we can get them to have a little bit better quality and enjoy the experience a little bit more when they're photographing their own flowers in their own gardens, or maybe when they're visiting a public garden.
Right. So I would say that the thing to keep in mind is photography is about light. And so when you're photographing, I think you should be aware of how light affects your subject. And I think it's just a matter of looking, try to see things in different light, and light actually sculpts the object or the subject that you're photographing. And it's just something that you just have to learn to see for yourself. And it's also subjective. So what is interesting to you might not be interesting to someone else, or what you are drawn towards, it might be different from someone else's vision. So I would say so much of photography is about looking, and learn to look and pay attention to details and light, and find what you like the best. I think that is the most crucial thing. And in terms of light, I myself prefer when it's not too bright, because things get a little too harsh. The shadows are too dark, too contrasty. I like things a little bit softer. You can see the details more clearly. When things are too blown out, you don't see the details. But it's all personal preference. And some people can make an incredibly beautiful, interesting photograph in bright light. I myself don't think I can, or don't feel inclined to make a photograph when in such condition. But I think it's all about learning to look and learning to know your own, or to know and develop your own vision.
I think that is so interesting. And it sounds like you need a great deal of patience.
Yes, you can't expect to be, it's just like anything else, you can't be a great writer by just jotting down a couple words. It takes a lot of practice and patience, and you can't be good at something by just dabbling in it, every once in a while. Yeah, you can take a good picture once in a while, but to consistently take good pictures, it takes patience and practice.
We're so fortunate in these days of digital that you can take a lot of pictures to practice.
Yes.
And back in the film days, you weren't going to spend a whole roll on one rose or one flower.
Exactly. But I think that comes with this disadvantage as well, because just because you can take a lot of pictures doesn't mean that you should take a lot of pictures. I think putting some thought into your picture does help a lot. And just remember, yes, it's great to take a lot of pictures as practice, but also do it more intentionally, pay more attention to what you are actually doing, what the photograph that you are actually taking each time.
GardenDC will be back after this short break.
In the book The Urban Garden by Kathy Jentz and Terry Spate, you'll find dozens of inspiring and creative ways to grow flowers, shrubs, vegetables, herbs, and other plants in small spaces and with a limited budget. Whether you want to grow on a balcony, rooftop, front stoop, or a tiny urban patio, turn your growing dreams into reality and build a gorgeous and unique garden that showcases your personal style while still being functional and productive. With the ingenious ideas and resourceful tactics found here, you'll be maximizing yields and beauty from every square inch of your space. No matter what you grow, the 101 amazing growing ideas found in the urban garden will turn your tiny urban yard into a treasure trove of green you'll be proud to share with family and friends. Buy your copy today at your local retail bookseller or order it online now at Amazon.com or bookshop.org.
Hilton brings you new ways to stay, with experiences that let you capture the glory days. Introducing the Graduate Hotels, each inspired by local college towns, these days are always original and never boring. Get in touch with traditions all across the country and enjoy a stay that's a class above the rest. Book at graduate hotels with Hilton Honors Points at Hilton.com. It's a win-win. Hilton, for the stay.
When you approach a photo shoot or visiting a garden, what are your first steps and what are you looking for?
So normally I go into a garden. I like to arrive the day before, so I have some time to be briefed, talk to the designer or the owner or the gardener about what's special in this particular place, and see it through their eyes and then see it through my eyes. Keeping both in mind, because usually I'm doing a job, unless it's just for me, taking these photographs for a purpose for someone. So it's that sort of first walk through to experience the space, and all of this has to be done very quickly and intuitively for me, because again, I'm walking through this space and noting the important things about the garden. You know, every garden has sort of its special qualities or something special about it in terms of the design or the plant combination or the plants themselves. So that's the first thing to take note of, and just sort of have a quick orientation for the lay of the land, sort of mental notes for myself, what I would like to concentrate on. And I come back either a couple hours later when the light is ideal for photography. And then I experience that garden again. The lighting at that particular time makes all the difference. So sometimes the things that I think look great when I first walk through it is not the best thing, but something else will stand out for me. So when I photograph, it has to be very quick because the light doesn't last very long, and it has to be very intuitive. I just respond. I mean, keeping in mind all the things that I had learned in my first walkthrough, and then incorporating that to what I'm responding at that moment with the light and how things look before my eyes at that very moment with my camera.
Mm-hmm. And so obviously when you're in the garden in situ, you're going to be using natural lighting.
Of course.
Do you
There's
use
no way to light it.
Yeah. Well, I was thinking you might use a reflector, or do you use anything like that?
I don't have time to play around with a reflector.
Mm-hmm.
It's such a small window for me to work in. You know, the light is good for maybe a couple of hours, and it could be an enormous garden of a few acres, or it could be a tiny garden, but still, it's not a lot of time. There's not a lot of time for me to experiment. All has to be done very instinctively and quickly.
And then when you're bringing flowers back to your studio, are you still using natural light in that situation?
No, it depends. I do a lot of sort of still life composition. Sometimes it will be done with natural light if I have a good lighting condition. A lot of times I light it. I like to do these compositions where it's like a very bright white background, and that I would have to light. I do two types of composition. One is like a dark kind of moody lighting, and that's usually natural light. And the other is sort of this very light, ethereal kind of composition, and that requires lighting.
And I'm imagining white balance as well.
Oh, yeah, of course.
So I think a lot of us are shooting with our smartphones these days. What type of equipment are you using?
Oh, well, I have to use a proper camera. That's a 35. I mean, it's not any special camera. It's the camera I've had for a very long time. In fact, I keep thinking it's time for me to upgrade, but it's just a 35 millimeter Canon camera, nothing special. I use it because it has the quality that I need. If I need to blow the picture up big, it has enough pixels and is light enough for me to carry around because I have to travel a lot. Yeah, and it's easy to use. It's not cumbersome.
And then are you using any particular photo editing and storage software?
Well, sometimes I shoot tethered to my laptop, so I use Capture One. And that's my software.
And then for your photo editing when you're back in the studio, are you doing any color correction
Of
or?
course, yes. Of course, I have to do a lot of color correction because if you know photography, light affects the color temperature. So if you're shooting, late or early morning, light can be very blue. If you're shooting late afternoon, it can be very warm. Yeah, that's all. And then also the color green is very, very difficult. It's always been, even when I was shooting film, green was always tricky, and the garden is all about green and getting the right green colors. I still often don't get the green color that I prefer, but it's always very tricky. Yeah, colors. I used to print color, and I think part of the reason I thought I could be a photographer was when I started working with color, because colors are so complex and they make the picture. I love the early photography colors where things are a bit more muted, things are a bit more real. Back in the day when we used film, there's a whole range of films that you could use for the different types of color that you would get. Fuji used to make this transparency film called Velvia where the colors were super saturated, like almost too much. And then Kodak makes this color that's called Portra, which is more realistic colors, more colors that you actually see with your eyes. And that was more the color palette that I prefer. So yeah, colors are very, very complicated.
Yeah, and that's interesting that you say that different film, casts different color saturations, but also I think different eras have different qualities. Like if you look back at 1970s gardening books in particular, everything looks yellow-green to me. Like there's a lot of yellow in there.
It just depends on the technology, at the time. We've come a long way from there in terms of, the iPhones can capture colors pretty well, but not always. Depending, if the light is neutral, then the colors can be quite true. But when the light is on either end of the spectrum, things can go a little bit haywire.
And what common mistakes do you see people making in their floral photos?
I wouldn't say mistakes. Again, I think it's all personal preferences, but I think there is a tendency, speaking of color, for people to gravitate towards the more saturated colors, thinking that, the more saturated, the better. But sometimes that can be off-putting to me. I don't like things to be too exaggerated. I like things to be a bit more realistic. So that to me, it's just my own personal preference.
And that kind of brings us to artificial intelligence and what it's doing to some of the flower photography that I'm seeing on the internet, which is, the very opposite of realistic.
Yeah, I try not to look at those, to be honest. I haven't really seen many, but I can imagine. I think again, just because you can do something doesn't mean that you should do it. I think it's more, again, I'm not against using artificial intelligence. I think all of these things are just tools. And I think the most important thing is having a vision, your own personal vision. And then you can choose among all these tools that you have at your disposal to create that vision. So if you want to use artificial intelligence, do it, but with a point of view, have a certain point of view. Do not let the artificial intelligence dictate that view.
That's a great point. And so when you're photographing flowers out in a garden or maybe bringing them back to the studio, do you do any cleanup, like removing, say, a spent blossom on a branch, or taking off some of the maybe guard petals on a rose that might be a little brown on their edges?
It all depends, I'm not averse to having things being imperfect. If I'm taking a photo, it all depends. If I'm taking a photograph for a commercial reason for, say, a beauty product that wants everything pristine, then maybe I'll clean up things a little bit. But I don't do much of that. My photography is more about expressing nature, so it's all part of nature. If I'm in the garden, sometimes I will tidy up a tiny bit, but if I'm photographing in the autumn, I want to see that part of the life cycle as well. So I will sometimes even photograph a spent flower, because sometimes it's really beautiful. There is a point to be made for the beauty of a spent flower. But it all depends on what the story I'm trying to tell with that picture.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree. There's beauty in the imperfections, especially. And do you have a special stage or favorite stage of the rose that you like, that prefer in bud or partly open, or do you want them fully blown out?
I love all stages. Just like all flowers, I love all stages. Part of what I love about camellias is the way they fall. The carpet of spent blooms on the ground.
Mm-hmm.
It's so beautiful to me. And it's something that I've been trying to capture, and I feel like I haven't been able to do it fully. That beauty of this carpet of flowers on the ground, be it camellias or magnolias or cherry blossoms or roses. I love it when you cut a rose and you bring it inside and you look at it for a few days and it's so beautiful, and then it just shatters and all the petals on the table. That is incredibly beautiful to me as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I love that also in tulips. I love to watch them shatter and how they fall apart. That's one of my favorite phases for me.
Tulips go through a month of shape-shifting, They're just fascinating to look at. Every day they're different. Every day they take on a different form. They're just amazing.
And do you have other favorite flowers that you love to photograph?
I love all of them. They all have something. And that's the thing about flowers. They come in so many different forms and shapes and colors, and beauty is so infinitely varied. Every flower has its own particular beauty. I love spring ephemerals, I love that they come for just a tiny moment in time, and they're so different and so delicate. Trilliums and bloodroot. They're so close to the ground that you really have to bend down and really look at them, and they just demand to be looked at.
And is there a photographer working today or in the past in the floral photography field that you admire or that you especially like?
There are many. Back in the 1920s, there was a Dutch photographer who was basically photographing for nursery catalogs and made some of the most beautiful pictures. His name is Leander Block. And Irving Penn made beautiful pictures of flowers, beautiful still lifes. I mean, they're just endlessly fascinating. Tim Walker, who's a fashion photographer, has also made some of the most beautiful flower photos. He uses a lot of flowers in his work as well. There's just so many people. That's the thing about flowers. They are so inspiring, and everyone has a different way of working with them and a different way of seeing them.
Yeah, I imagine that when you go to a florist and are photographing them, that's a very different experience than in a garden with the gardener.
Right. Yes, I love florists, because they, again, have their own way of looking at flowers. They make these incredible compositions. I have some of my best friends are florists, and I admire them greatly. Emily Thompson, she makes these incredible installations, really. She's like an artist. She's a sculptor when she works with flowers. Sarah Rhiannon, she's in my book, In Bloom. She just has the most poetic way of looking at flowers. I worked with Nicolette Camille. All of these people. I love florists who bring out the natural qualities of flowers, the poetic quality of flowers. Yeah, there's so many talented florists working today. We're very lucky.
We are. And also that we have access to all these florists and flowers.
Mm-hmm.
If you don't have them in your garden, you
Mm-hmm.
can buy them year round.
Right.
That wasn't always available to people in previous decades. You can go
Mm-hmm.
and buy almost anything at any time of year. But I do love, as you said, like the spring ephemerals, and that there are short periods of time, say for the peony, which is one of my favorite flowers. It's only there for those couple of weeks.
Yes, yes. And I think we should learn to appreciate the fact that they only come for a specific time of the year. We shouldn't want to have them all the time. I think it's much more important and much more beautiful to me to see the flower in the time that they are here on Earth, rather than wanting to have it with us at any time that we want. You know, having peonies in January is not, to me, desirable, because having peonies come in June when they're here is that anticipation, is that time marker, is that the beauty of it. Part of that beauty is that it only comes at this particular time and you have to wait for it. Just like, you know, eating tomatoes all year round, we shouldn't have peonies all year round.
And it does teach patience and appreciation for what we have.
Yes, exactly.
How can our listeners contact you?
The best way to contact me is on Instagram, and my Instagram handle is at @min_ngok, which is MINH_NGOC.
And final thoughts on flower photography. There are many people I know who I think are reticent to take many pictures. They're, maybe going to take one or two of their own garden and not that many for just saving. But what would you tell people who are a little shy about doing that?
Don't be shy. I think spending time in your garden and looking at things at different times of day, at different times of the year. You know your garden more than anyone else, and you know the beauty of your garden, the particular beauty of your garden. Try to capture those moments. I think it's great. People don't get to see those moments that you get to see. Try to put those moments into a picture if you can. I know sometimes people say, "Oh, I can't take the picture that I see." I think it's a matter of learning to know what the camera sees versus what your eyes see, and then making the camera work for you. It's true that the camera sees very differently from how your eyes see, but you can, if you know what that difference is, you can sort of minimize the difference. And sometimes the camera gives you something extra that your eyes don't give you.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so experiment, try to bring out those, just really concentrate on the things that you really want to capture and think carefully, and then use the camera to try to express that.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Nak.
It's my pleasure. Thank you.
GardenDC will be back after this short break.
Get low-maintenance alternatives to lawns with Ground Cover Revolution by Kathy Jentz. Reducing the lawn is among the biggest trends in homeownership, with an endless stream of homeowners looking for an eco-friendly alternative to a traditional turfgrass lawn. In the last few years alone, over 23 million Americans converted part of their lawn to a natural landscape, and now they're looking to do even more. The biggest challenge to adopting this new ideal of the perfect lawn? Knowing how and when to replace your turf and which plants are the best ones for the job. Ground Cover Revolution is here with all the answers you need, and some you didn't even know you needed. Included are 40 in-depth profiles of plants that are perfect choices for replacing a grass lawn. There are options for sun, for shade, for dry and wet sites, and for various climates around the globe. There are choices that bloom, options that are evergreen, and selections that are deer-resistant. Kathy Jentz has also included an incredibly useful chart that gives you all the specifics on each of the 40 choices for quick reference and to make your ground cover selection process even easier. Whether you want to replace the entire lawn or just reduce the amount of land dedicated to turf, Ground Cover Revolution will help you usher in a new and improved idea of what a beautiful lawn should be. Ground Cover Revolution is available now wherever you buy books, including Amazon.com and Bookshop.org.
That's your money saying it's time for a McDonald's run. Because with new McValue at McDonald's, you get more than you expect. Like buy a 6-piece McNuggets and add a McChicken for just $1. Your money says let's go. Get more than you expect with new McValue. Prices and participation may vary. Valid for item of equal or lesser value.
Kangaroo paws, plant profile. Kangaroo paws, an Anigoxanthus species, is an annual with long strappy foliage and cute fuzzy flowers that resemble a kangaroo paw. It blooms from spring through summer in a rainbow of colors from bright pink to green to purple. You should deadhead them to encourage continual blooming. It's hardy to zones 10 and 11. It's also known as sword lily and is native to Australia. The red and green kangaroo paw is the floral emblem of Western Australia. Once the temperatures drop to 50 degrees Fahrenheit or below, the plant will die back and can be composted. You can also winter it over as a houseplant in a bright light location. Kangaroo paw grows best in full sun and well-draining sandy soils. It does not require fertilizer. It typically grows from 3 to 6 feet tall and 3 feet wide. There are also dwarf forms that only grow a foot wide and high and are suitable for container gardens. Kangaroo paw is deer resistant. Bees and hummingbirds can't resist visiting the tubular flowers. Kangaroo paws, you can grow that. What's new in the garden this week? Well, my azaleas are in their full glory. And speaking of azaleas, if you want to visit some beautiful azalea displays in the Washington, D.C. region, you can find a listing of them on our website at washingtongardener.blogspot.com. Over at the community garden plot, our arugula is almost ready for harvesting and everything else is humming along nicely. The garden tips that we shared this week included various kinds of gardening advice for the season, including a reminder to remove holiday lights or any wiring from trees before they put on their spring growth. This includes removing or enlarging any tree guards like wire cages that prevent deer rubs. The Northern Virginia azalea sale that we told you about a few episodes ago has been postponed due to rain forecasts and has been rescheduled to Sunday, April 27th from 10 to 3 p.m. at Meadowlark Gardens in Vienna, Virginia. Our new issue of Washington Gardener magazine is out and posted to our website. Again, that's washingtongardener.blogspot.com, and this is the April 2025 issue. Inside that issue, you'll find stories on how and when to repot your houseplants, the fragrant mock orange, winter burn on evergreens, celebrating tulip time, weeding out bad bed straws, that annoying weed, Asiatic lilies for summer drama, parsnip, the ancient heirloom vegetable, spring native plants, garden book reviews, and much, much more. In garden events that are happening locally, you might want to attend the Maryland House and Garden Pilgrimage that runs from April 29th to June 4th. And it highlights different counties in Maryland each year. This year, Queen Anne's County will be on May 3rd. Prince George's County will be on June 14th. Tours run between 10 to 5 p.m. Tickets are $40 beforehand, $45 on the day of. And you can find out more about that tour at mhgp.org. That's Maryland House and Garden Pilgrimage.org. And there is a Capitol Hill Restoration Society Mother's Day House and Garden Tour, and that takes place Mother's Day weekend, May 10th to 11th. You can check out 11 Capitol Hill homes during this 2-day event. A refreshment break with treats from local vendors is also provided. You can see details and how to get tickets to that at chrs.org. That's Capitol Hill Restoration Society.org. And then coming up on May 20th is our second annual Reduce Your Lawn Day. So that's a new annual holiday that we are celebrating. You can register your pledge to reduce your turfgrass lawn and be automatically entered for a chance to win a prize package at reduceyourlawnday.com. And you can find tips there for reducing your lawn and replacing it with more eco-friendly alternatives. Happy gardening!
This is The Last Word by Christy Page at Greenprints, with Transforming Urban Spaces, a story by Frederick Sazanga. In the lively heart of Kampala, Uganda, an abandoned lot lay forgotten amidst bustling buildings and vibrant streets. For years, it remained a dreary sight, cluttered with trash and tangled weeds. But then, a spark of imagination ignited among a handful of determined locals. With laughter and enthusiasm, we envisioned a transformation, dreaming of a lush green haven amidst an urban hustle. Together, we embarked on a joyful journey, turning the neglected space into a vibrant community garden. As each planting season unfolded, our garden bloomed with life, offering an abundance of fresh vegetables and fruits to share among neighbors. It became more than just a patch of green. It became our cherished sanctuary where children laughed and learned about nature, and friendships blossomed like the flowers we tend. Inspired by the success of projects like Detroit's urban gardening movement, our garden became a beacon of positivity and productivity, transforming urban blight into a joy and source of abundance. Through our shared efforts, we discovered the true power of community and joy, proving that even the most neglected spaces can be transformed into sources of happiness and vitality. This has been The Last Word by Christy Page at greenprints.com.
Thank you for listening to GardenDC. You can become a listener supporter for as little as 99 cents a month by going to the supporter link in our show notes or directly to podcasters.spotify.com/pod/show/GardenDC/support. Another way to support this podcast is to subscribe to our monthly digital publication, Washington Gardener Magazine. To do so, go to WashingtonGardener.com or WashingtonGardener.blogspot.com. You can find Washington Gardener on social media at WDC Gardener on Twitter or X, Instagram, and Pinterest, and on Facebook at Washington Gardener Magazine. And be sure to leave us a 5-star review on your favorite podcast platform. Please take a minute to share us on social media with #GardenDC so other gardeners can find us too.